Before I get into what the metaphor is, I figured I should first say a bit about myself and why I've been thinking about this particular metaphor a lot right now at work. So a bit about me. I started an industry about 10 years ago at a small startup, 30 people. And every company I've worked at since then has been slightly larger, 75, 200, 700, 1,000. And 2 months ago, I started working at a 6,000 person company. And I've had a ton of different titles across those different companies, but regardless of title and regardless of size of the company, there's been one skill that's been crucial in my success, and that's building clocks. And the reason I've been thinking about this particular metaphor recently is second week at the new company, it was announced that our CTO was moving into a CPTO role. And I wanted to know more about who he was as a leader. How does he think? What does he prioritize? What matters to him? And so I was asking my manager about this, and she said, well, he's really, he really knows our customer. He really knows our product. He's a visionary. He thinks in like 3, 10, 20-year horizon, because that's how our customers think, and really deep in the details. And I was like, what do you mean about deep in the details? She said, oh, well, sometimes when something comes up, he'll reach out to a particular squad and tell them, hey, for the next sprint, you need to work on that. I was like, oh, okay. What clock is he looking at that triggers that conversation? And she rightly asked, what am I talking about? And it's from this book, Built to Last, written actually in the 90s. And it is about how do you think of setting up companies to withstand the test of time and live beyond a single visionary at a company, right? And one of the concepts that they talk about is this difference between a time teller as a leader and a clock builder as a leader. So a time teller is someone who has their own little pocket watch. They look at it and everyone has to ask them, what time is it? Versus a clock builder builds that clock, puts it on the wall, and everyone has access to that information and can reference it. The book is a leadership book, so a lot of the examples that they give are top down, right? So, when you go into a company and you see the values written on the walls or the principles or this, that, and the other, and it can feel a little corny, but that's them trying to build a clock. That's them trying to democratize. This is the culture we're trying to build here. Everyone can see it. Everyone has access to it. Another example would be something like product vision or product strategy. If we can get it out of people's heads, put it somewhere where people have access to it, everyone can think about, how does my work align with this strategy? And I don't have to ask my leader, hey, what's the strategy again? Hey, Q3, Q4 coming up, what's the strategy? But I think the power is also in bottom up. Our teams are on the ground doing a lot of activities, repeating a lot of processes, gathering a lot of data, going through these processes. How do we capture that value in a clock? Example could be a team wiki. So this is how we use Slack. Being explicit about working norms. This is how we go through peer reviews, or this is how we handle particular incidences. And my favorite example is using playbooks. So I used to work at HelloFresh, where we had a country launch playbook because we were launching in countries pretty regularly. Instead of reinventing the wheel every time and thinking through the risks, how do you set up a new entity? How do you think about a new menu? All this sort of stuff. We could write it out as a playbook and then go back to that, not reinvent the wheel, not think from scratch about it. Where it gets a little difficult is if you get value from your role and being the only person who can answer a question, the only person who can do that thing. And you've sort of created like job security through becoming this bottleneck. I would recommend in this instance for you to shift the way you view the value you add to a company from the work that I do plus the work that I enable. And then you can see how everything that you're building out will last beyond you and continue to help a company grow. You could say, no, Amanda, I still don't believe you. I think it is faster if I just do it myself. So I came up with a little exercise that if we had more than 10 minutes, I would try to show you here. But you could break a group into 3 teams and say, team 1, only one person has the instructions of something to build. And it's just a little diagram of like, try to build this out of blocks or Legos or whatever you have access to. And then team 2 would be everyone can see the instructions. And then team 3 would be everyone can see the instructions, plus they have a step-by-step guide. And you could time how long it takes them to build this thing out and see also how does it change the way they work together and the way they discuss things. And you might find that in team 1, it was really easy to know who's doing what, but it was slower. Team 3, it took a bit of upfront, hey, we have to talk about this and have roles and responsibilities. But once we got that, we were able to move really fast. And you have to ask yourself about that trade-off. Last thing I will leave you with is some tips for clock building. So look for clocks before you ask what time it is. There is a lot of information out there, especially if you're new to an organization. Like try to find that information yourself. Second one is build clocks if you find people are asking you what time it is. If you look back on your week and you have stakeholders who are repeatedly asking you similar questions, how can you build a clock that you can then just send them to that point and they can start to self-serve? And then the last one, and I think this is actually the most important one, is empowering your teams to adjust the time. So as new information comes in, priorities shift, we've learned something, we need to iterate and adjust the time on that. And yeah, that's a QR code for my LinkedIn, and let's connect.